I think youth church means a lot of things to me, but mainly trust and family.
Because of youth church, I've been able to grow more in my faith, and I've been able to learn more about God in a space where I can enjoy it.
A place to get support if I need it, and it's been really helpful in my journey.
It fills you with joy every time you're here because you have a community which all loves God, and we're all so kind and open with each other that it's amazing.
Our vision at Youth Church is to reach young people across Southampton, to raise them as followers of Jesus and to release them as influencers of culture. I started as the youth worker here at Highfield Church about 5 years ago now, in 2017. I knew God was calling me towards church leadership. Wasn't really thinking about church planting, but church leadership for sure. And when I first arrived, I felt like God was saying, don't rush away from what I'm doing. So in those first few years of running the youth work here, we saw an incredible amount of growth, and we saw young people coming to faith through that. But what we weren't seeing is those young people coming on a Sunday to church. And something about that was there was a disconnect. We realised that actually nationally, this is a huge challenge of getting young people engaged with church on a Sunday morning. Coming out of 2019, we had an idea, we knew what God was calling us to. I went on the church planting course, and that was really pivotal in us wrestling and working through what youth church was and is now. And honestly, I think that was the thing that helped us through the pandemic that came. Through that turbulent storm that was the pandemic, we knew we had God's sense of call still, but the plant course and the vision and values that we'd kind of created through that gave us what we needed to cling to. It kind of became an anchor for us through the storm that was the pandemic. And I remember in a prayer time on the plant course, somebody came over and prophetically said, I think you're going to do for church what Uber Taxis has done for London. So there was this kind of idea that we were going to do something completely different that might cause a lot of disruption. And the one thing that struck me during the pandemic was that the one thing all of these companies have in common is their use of technology. So we prioritised Friday night youth on Zoom with our young people. Youth church on a Sunday, we pivoted at first. We started by trying to do like a 4:00 live stream on Zoom, but through YouTube, and playing around with some clever stuff. And in the end, it didn't really work. So for the first lockdown, we kind of dropped that stuff. As things were starting to open up, church, quite rightly, and like lots of churches did, prioritise getting everyone back in the room, getting people back into the building. With youth church, we got the young people back on a Friday evening, we got the small groups back up and running, but for Sunday youth church, we started as a live stream only. So from October 2020 through to April of 21, we were just a YouTube live stream. What was great about that was that through those periods of lockdown, we were able to still have young people involved in youth church itself. We could have young people come and lead worship. We had young people coming to be filmed to do talks. So one of the blessings of that season was that even though so many things were restricted, we were still able to invest in young people, to allow them opportunities to grow and to lead. They still felt a sense of ownership, even though we were online only.
I was initially kind of involved, I guess right from when it was initially a concept, when Tim mentioned it to me and kind of chatted about the idea of what if we could make a space a little bit like Soul Survivor or a festival like that for young people, but every week. When I first led a talk, I was very scared because I hadn't really ever been given that platform before. And I think Tim had seen something in me that perhaps I hadn't seen in myself. But then afterwards, I really felt, well, while I was giving the talk, I really felt the Spirit like really speaking through me. And afterwards, I just thought, you know what? Like, that wasn't about me. It was about God speaking through me. And actually, since then, I've really seen kind of my giftings grow.
So as things started to open up, we'd got Youth Church up and running as a live stream. We knew we could invite young people back into the room. And I, at first, was pretty confident that digital is so important, that young people live their lives online, that we were going to stick with the live stream and do some kind of hybrid. But very quickly, we realised that actually for our community, that was more of a barrier than a blessing. What we found was, firstly, our numbers dropped right off because everyone's in the room. There's no one at home watching it. So what we did at that point was we dropped the live stream in favour of just filming the talks. We said, like, let's film the 10, 15-minute talk and we'll post that on YouTube. And in tandem to that, what we then started to do was film a 1-minute clip, a 1-minute kind of snippet from the talk in that vertical style and post that to Instagram Reels and eventually to TikTok. What we saw straight away was those videos got huge amount of traction. We were seeing, maybe 30 views on YouTube, and yet we'd post it on Instagram and get 3,000 views within a couple of hours. Part of our vision statement as Youth Church is to release as influencers of culture. And that word release, that kind of part of our vision, was really about raising young people up in leadership. But again, our hope was that this would become a church plant and not just a community of young people. We wanted it to be broader than that. And so there was an element of actually we want to release people into leadership. We want to raise people up and get them leading and stuff. So what Youth Church has given us the opportunity to do is have young people, students and young adults, as well as other people as well, involved in speaking at church and leading worship, in preaching, leading services through a whole bunch of ways. We've been able to give them opportunities to lead.
So I'm going to be graduating this summer. In fact, I've got my last exam in a week's time, and I'm going to train to become a teacher. And before getting involved in youth and Youth Church, I never would have considered doing that. I'm a lot more confident now to be able to stand in front of class and teach than I would have been before. Obviously, teaching about the Bible is quite different to teaching about physics, but the skills of being able to engage people and get people's attention and be able to do it with confidence, I think that's going to really help me going forwards.
What we've now been on the journey on is thinking about how do we be a resource for youth ministry generally. So we've been in conversation with our deanery and our diocese about how to do that. We've started to create small group resources for other churches. We've started to run worship events. We're putting on a summer youth festival for churches in Southampton this year. We are, and again, now what we're doing is trying to explore with which of those churches we're going to partner with in a more meaningful way to almost plant youth ministry into those locations. I think something I've learnt through this, and that I'd want others to know, is that all of this has been a step of obedience. All of this has been trying to seek God and step out boldly, even if we don't know where that leads. I mean, still we don't know where this is going to lead. There's loads of questions that we're working through, like how do we grow this, and we're talking about how do we resource youth ministries across our area now in the way that we have done. But I think what I've learned is that it's about trusting God, and don't be afraid to dream big. Don't be afraid to think big.
What I would say to a church leader to try something new would be just be obedient to what you feel like God's calling you to do. And actually, if it starts small, I think it's really easy to look at numbers and be like, oh, well, there's only 10, there's only 15 or whatever. But actually, if you feel like God's put something on your heart, even if one person comes away from it knowing a little bit more of who Jesus is, then it's worth it. So yeah, I'd say have fun with it, don't take yourself too seriously, and if God's in it, then it won't go very wrong.